All right, well, it is 3:02 here on the East Coast, so I think it's good for us to go ahead and get started. And I think most of our presenters are here, so we should have an awesome discussion. But I wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining today. Just a reminder to please keep your microphone on mute if you're not speaking. And today, at least during the presentation part, we will not be using cameras. So without further ado, hello and welcome to the 2020 ESIP Collaboration Area Highlights webinar. My name is Megan Carter. I'm the Community Director of ESIP and I'll be your host for today. I'm so excited to see you all here, both new folks and old friends. Just a reminder that this is being recorded and will be shared on the ESIP YouTube channel afterwards. The Earth Science Information Partners, or ESIP, as you know it, is home to 30+ vibrant and diverse community-driven collaboration areas. Today, you'll hear from 12 different groups who will each give 3-minute lightning presentations. This webinar is an annual event that aims to broaden awareness of collaboration area activities, increase communication and collaboration between the existing collaboration areas, and it's an opportunity to invite new participants in. So if you see something here that piques your interest, we want you to feel welcome to get involved. Oops, skipped a slide. ESIP is a community of earth and environmental science data people, first and foremost. It spans a number of different science domains and roles within the federal, private, and academic sector. The community, therefore, can be thought of as a brain trust of science data people. The small but dedicated ESIP staff and the collaborative infrastructure that we've developed over the years enable individuals to find each other and work together, allowing participants to leverage their collective expertise to find real solutions they can take home and employ within their home institutions. ESIP collaboration areas address pressing and emerging data-related challenges and opportunities for the benefit of science and society. Each of these groups meet virtually, generally monthly, and at ESIP meetings to make progress on their goals. Some share knowledge by hosting webinar speakers, others develop outputs and guidelines, maintain resources, lead open discussion, and more. Many of these groups have never been more active than they are currently, so again, I urge you to get involved in one or more of them. Today you'll hear from those groups in bold here, but you can also go to our website or contact me if you'd like to know about those that are not presenting here today. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our presenters. Just a reminder that each group will have 3 minutes to present. I will drive the slides and be rather strict on time. Erin already showed us her alarm that she's using to help keep time. So if you're presenting and you hear the timer go off, we respectfully ask that you please wrap up immediately. If you have questions along the way, there is the chat box, or even better, I would like to use this simple Google Doc that Erin has put in the chat box, and I can paste again in case you just joined us. And this is a place where you can record questions for individual groups, or there's a section where you can record a question if you have one that applies to more than one group. We're hoping to have time at the end for discussion based on this document. And of course, we hope to continue the conversation, and this will be a great way to record and preserve those questions. So without further ado, I'd like to move to our first speaker, representing the Agriculture and Climate Cluster. I'd like to invite Brian Wee to unmute and start us off.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Brian Wee, and Bill Tang at Goddard, NASA Goddard, and I co-chair the Agriculture and Climate Cluster. And so what I'm about to describe to you within the 3 minutes is a activity that our cluster initiated very recently, about 2 months ago, based on some ideas that we had been experimenting with through a funded ESIP lab project. What you see on the screen here is a concept map, and the activity that I'm about to describe to you is essentially about concept mapping. And what I will do for this slide number 1 is to start on the right and work to the left a bit. On the right, what you have there is a description of what we hope to use the concept maps for. Essentially, what we are trying to do is to use concept maps to capture the end-to-end traceability of how data is turned into information and used for decision making. And so For short, we are addressing the problem of data to decisions provenance. How do you capture that traceability, and how do you use that traceability to enable context-aware data, information, and knowledge discovery? So that's another way of saying if the machine, quote unquote, knows how data is used for a specific question or specific context, you could imagine that you could apply techniques to help the user search for data that is applicable to the question that he or she is working on. And so that is one of the motivations for capturing the data to decisions traceability in a concept map. The other rationale for capturing this traceability in the concept map is to allow ESIPers to tell a story about how they did it for a specific context. To the left of the diagram, we show you how we're planning to do it right now. We have already a demonstration use case for resilience planning. And so we're going to focus mostly on risk, vulnerability, exposure, hazard. We're starting on a use case for disaster mitigation. Next slide. And this is how we have started doing a use case that will trace to science, technology, and policy components. And then the last slide. And this is how you can get involved. And next week, we have a special session for everybody to find out more about what we're doing. And that's it.
Great timing.
Thank you very much, Brian. Next up, we have Zachary Robbins, the Community Fellow for the Community Resilience Cluster.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zachary Robbins, the Community Fellow for the Community Resilience Cluster. Within the last year, we've all seen many examples of how climate change, natural disaster, and emerging health threats can negatively shape our society. And data and earth science data plays a big role in how we can curtail these events within our communities. However, we also must find ways to be proactive to the next event. In the Community Resilience Cluster, we aim to find ways to use earth science community to expand community resilience through improving accessibility, community trust, and providing actionable information. Community resilience means not just responding to events as they occur, but expanding the adaptive capacity of communities to weather future economic, ecological, and societal disasters. And earth science can play a really large role in empowering community decision makers to assess and prepare for their own place-based and unique needs. Next slide. So currently our cluster is writing a paper, and this is born out of a series of sessions that were held at ESIP meetings. We are working to recognize and articulate the problems community decision makers face when utilizing earth science data to increase their community resilience. We show here 3 of the major categories that these can fall into. First, a misalignment of goals can often lead to products that are too vast, too far in the future, or too theoretical to be used by community planners. So we got to find ways to change the driving agents between what communities need and those of the larger body of science in order to get actionable results. The human dimensions of science also often stand in the way. These include epistemic problems within science, the drivers of research, tribalism in scientific understanding, and limitations to the types of knowledge science can provide. This results in a disenfranchisement of certain populations to representative or applicable data for their needs. Finding the right data can also be a huge barrier. This can be simple computational cost, ability to assess the applicability or trustworthiness of a data set, and semantic knowledge barriers. If you're interested in learning more about what we're doing with this paper, feel free to check out the ESIP Community Fellows blog. We just put out a blog this week. Slide. And here's all our information, what we're going to be doing going forward. We're finishing up this problem statement, and then we're hoping possibly to move to providing guidelines to data providers on how to increase community resilience. I'd encourage you to join our email list or our Slack channel and join us every 3rd Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zachary. Moving right along, we will invite Anna Gold, who is representing the Clean Network. And I'd just like to point out that the Clean Network is an example of a very successful ESIP collaboration area that has grown so much so that the Clean Network will relate to ESIP in more of a partner way in the future. So Anna, please take it away.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, that is right. Thank you for these initial words. Clean has joined ESIP as a cluster in 2017 under Tamara Ledley, and at that point it was an NSF and NOAA NASA funded network, and has, through support from ESIP, really grown into a vibrant network. So CLEAN stands for Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network. We have 3 big components, and the one is our network itself, which is has a vibrant email lists with I know 80 to 100 emails from a collection of partners that are all, or anyone who's interested in climate literacy, from scientists to teachers to professionals, artists, policymakers. And we do have weekly network calls, and these calls are for sharing some of the work that is being done as CLEAN, but it's also being used to develop new strategies or respond to emergent efforts. So that's one of the parts of what CLEAN does, and that's where the cluster and ESIP has really supported us with infrastructure and with a fellow for a couple of years. Then CLEAN has another part where we curate a collection of 700 plus educational resources. They are K through 16. They are resources that can be used in the classroom. They are peer reviewed by scientists and educators and are classroom ready. And so we have the infrastructure to provide these resources and curate a collection that's online, easy, accessible, is aligned with the standards and things like that. And then we provide a lot of support for teachers and educators how to teach about climate and energy topics, because that's, as we all know, a critical support that's needed, because there is so much controversy around it, and the science is complicated, and so we provide webinars, background information, and then of course the network supports too. So how you could get involved? We're an open network, are very excited for anyone to join us for the weekly calls, join the email listserv. We also have newsletters that we put out bi-monthly, and offer webinar series and review panels. So that's the structure where you can get involved, and yeah, ask if there are any other questions.
Thank you very much, Anna. Next up, we have another ESIP Community Fellow, Alexis Gerritsen, who will talk about the Data Stewardship Committee.
Hi, as Megan said, I'm the Community Fellow for the Data Stewardship Committee, and our goals as the Data Stewardship Committee is to help develop and foster practices and standards in the field of earth science informatics. And so we sort of function as a ecosystem within ESIP, where we support clusters and work with clusters that are part of ESIP and help facilitate collaboration. And we also have some of our own projects ongoing. So we're really interested in helping support synthesis goals and data management. Next. Over the last year, we had a pretty productive year. So Information Quality Cluster, RAMA, and the Data Stewardship Committee helped to put together ISO 19165-2 that puts forth content specifications for earth science observation data. A data citation review paper detailing the history of data citations was published. We published an article putting forth a tool to help evaluate risk factors that face data, and Information Quality, which is a cluster we work closely with, published a white paper on uncertainty in earth science data. This year we have a new co-chair, Amber Budden, and new co-chairs, Kelsey Bressman and Daniela Lowenberg, who are helping to support the cluster in our new goals. So next. this year, our priorities, we have 5 working priorities that are, some of them are continuations from last year and some of them are new. And we're definitely looking for people to get involved in any or all of them and clusters to partner with. So we are working on developing some tools to synthesize different repository finding tools, looking at comparing fair metrics for data and for software. We have an ongoing collaboration for data management training and providing sort of a repository space for that. I'm helping to spin up some work around data management and uncertainty within citizen science in partnership with Yashing and the Information Quality Cluster. And we have some ongoing work looking at how to bring some data stewardship thoughts into some of the tech-heavy work that schema.org has been doing to support schemas. If you're interested in learning more, the contact at the bottom of the screen will subscribe you to our listserv, and we have our meetings on Mondays. We just switched our meeting time, so it's now Mondays each month, or a Monday each month.
Thank you, Alexis. All right, so next up, we'll have Dave Jones from the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster.
Hi, Megan, thanks, and hello, everybody. The Disaster Lifecycle Cluster remains a pretty busy cluster as we're looking into a lot of current activities that are happening and responses that are required. So the cluster really focuses on identifying and applying trusted data sources, which is a very important evolving term to share across platforms to operational sectors. I was just got off and joined this call a little bit late, but just was on a FEMA geospatial call, and boy, there's a lot of needs there for identifying trusted data sources. We also evolve operational readiness levels, so ORLs, and apply those ORLs to data sets that we can use in a testing environment, and then we can migrate those as well into the operational environment. And we love engaging ESIP members to improve collaborative decision making. So there are a number of clusters that we work with now and would like to work with some more. So new and noteworthy for us, we debuted the operational readiness levels. They're being adopted actually by DHS and FEMA, which is a great success that has come out of a joint effort between the ESIP Federation and the All Hazards Consortium. Also, most recently, I had a telecon with the American Logistics Aid Network, and they are really looking to evolve their data sets as ORL data sets, which is terrific. We're ongoing also with COVID-19 response support to the transportation sector, and CDAC and Bob Chen and Bob Downs and their group there have put together some population density and COVID-19 tracking capabilities in a new app that they put out. And also, you know, we're very much involved in leveraging more earth science data into this decision-making environment. Next slide. So some of the member highlights, I just mentioned CDAC developing the COVID-19 viewer. We're putting GeoCollaborate into work, which allows the access and sharing of geospatial and other data across any platform in real time, a real-time synchronous capability. The cluster, we're working hard too on the planning of the summer meeting, which is now going to be officially remote. So we've suggested another session that we can build on our disaster cluster to identify more trusted data sources within the government and leveraging private sector data sources. We're also working to accelerate access into more EOS-DIS data sets, working with Element 84 and their innovative sort of AWS snowball efforts to get more data on site for supporting wildfire research. And also the drone and ag and cluster and information technology interoperability folks we're really looking forward to working on. And the last slide is, I think it's just contacting us, Karen Moe. This is the poster that we had in the winter meeting. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dave. Next is Chris Linus, who's representing a newly rebooted Discovery cluster.
Hi, thanks, Megan. So Discovery Cluster is both an old cluster and a new cluster. You know, we started off with open search, then we did some work on search relevancy, kind of went on a hiatus. And now what we're trying to work on is how to help users discover data based on the usage they want to place that data to. So in other words, have use, do you have data that works for that use? This is a very simple explanation of how we intend to use graph databases in order to attack this. It's an example of a rainfall data set, and this rainfall data set in particular is both used by a publication, a research publication, and you can see the DOI for that publication there, but you also find that data set being used for landslide hazard assessment model, which is an application. So the idea is if I know I want to work on, let's say, landslide hazard assessment, I can come in, look at applications like that and see what data they use, and then go and look at those data to see if they'll work for my use as well. Next slide, please. So this is our basic schedule, roadmap over the next few months. We're working on a template to collect those kinds of user stories. We will then be collecting some user stories, both from within the cluster, and we'll probably put a call out, outside the cluster to clusters where we know we got good user story potential. And then we will also be collecting some relationships between data sets and how those data sets are used. And then we hope to put all of that together in a Hackfest in the newly rebooted ESIP virtual meeting in July. Next slide, please. So this is what we had in mind for that Hackfest. Basically, we see it as being a collaboration amongst folks that are expert in data and metadata, data wranglers, folks that are experts or have applications in mind or work on applications. So for instance, folks in, say, the disasters lifecycle cluster, as well as actual developers. So not everybody has to be a coder to participate in this Hackfest. In fact, we hope they aren't all coders. We need people that sort of span the range of participation in those various user stories. And of course, as you saw from the previous slide, we will have some user stories and some links between use and data, as well as some off-the-shelf tools all feeding into that Hackfest. What we hope to come out of that with is one or more essentially demo prototypes of how using the data usage can lead a user to find the data they're looking for. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Chris. So we shared a Google Doc at the beginning where we're hoping that folks will put their questions, and then we'll have time at the end, and I'll pop that in the chat box in case anybody came in late.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
All right, so next up, we'll have Colin Smith to talk about the Information Management Code Registry.
Thanks, Megan. I'm Colin Smith and a co-chair of the Information Management Code Registry with Kristen Vanderbilt. And so central to enhancing the value of data are good information management practices, and this cluster works towards that end by facilitating discovery of software solutions for information management needs. We focus on software, information management software that can be run from a user's local environment or accessed through web services, while emphasizing freely accessible and community supported software, and are really focused on the needs of individuals and small research teams that are now being confronted in some scientific disciplines with additional requirements of being a little bit better at information management processes. Next. And so our goals are to primarily accelerate information management tasks among such user communities by simplifying discovery of such software through a substantial registry that's searchable by information management task, software language, science domain, etc. But also to help facilitate and drive forward new opportunities, new development opportunities by identifying coverage gaps, openly discussing and recording community ideas, and organizing hackathons. Next. And so the activities that we're primarily engaged with are first the implementation of the registry, which is completed. It's implemented in Ontosoft, and curation of information management software is an ongoing manual process. We have, I think, close to 200 software packages registered in the IMCR currently. We work on enabling discovery of these packages by providing a simple search interface that is augmented with controlled vocabulary. So recently we aligned our vocabulary to the software ontology and other related terms in the Global Change Master Directory. And we're always on the lookout for improving this vocabulary. Maintenance, we're working on ways to automate the maintenance and make sure that the metadata of all the software are up to date to ensure accuracy and reduce effort in maintenance. And engagement, looking to create, help identify new opportunities and create new tools. Stop by the wiki if you're interested, and looking forward to meeting you. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you, Colin. So next on the list, alphabetically, is the Information Technology and Interoperability Committee. Dave Blodgett, the committee chair, was not able to be here today, so I'm going to do my best to represent this group. The IT&I committee is helping put data to work for people with a focus on new and progressing technologies that help people to get and understand data, build better tools to access and work with data, and find answers they need to make progress. We host monthly webinars. We, the IT&I committee, host monthly webinars on a range of topics with recent focus on cloud technologies that aid earth science interoperability, the ongoing transition of WebI best practices, such as the spatio-temporal asset catalogs, structured data that brings the power of the semantic web to the mass market, and new progress in the arena of science gateways that empower any researcher to scale up their data-driven science. So you can look up the ESIP IT&I committee on the ESIP website or contact Dave at the address you see on the screen to learn more. Next up, Adam Shepard will speak about the schema.org cluster.
Hey friends, this is Adam Shepard. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Schema.org cluster. And for those who aren't familiar with Schema.org, it's a type of markup that you use in web pages to help search engines better describe the contents of your web pages. And so our group's focus is sort of how we bring that technology to the data set web pages and data repository web pages and other things that are relevant to research resources into focus into that group. And so we sort of feel like we sit in between the common web publishing standards that are developed for like commerce and selling goods and good search on Google and Bing using schema.org, and the great work that's happened on the science side with ISO metadata and other metadata files, EML, DOIs. And so how do we sort of bridge that gap? And so what we've done as a cluster is develop some guidelines. And so we can move to the next slide. So we've developed some guidelines, and we really feel like we're sort of wilderness trail guides, guiding folks through what schema.org is and how to use it, because it can be very confusing. And so we've developed these guidelines, which you can get at scienceonschema.org. And we take the telecons at ESIP on the first Monday and fourth Thursday of the month to sort of work through issues, fix improvements, help describe other related science resources just beyond data sets. So that's our first sort of action or strategic action there. And then the second is really to sort of take that effort and bring it to the community. And so there's been a number of folks who have run workshops at AGU, ESIP meetings, domain-specific meetings. I think Ruth has run some for the polar data community to help get research data sets better described and findable at Google. And so if we move to the last slide, I can't remember exactly what I put on it. Oh yeah, okay, so our group's been pretty active, even though we're still fairly new. We just released our most recent changes on April 1st, which was not a joke. And that work revolved around how we describe persistent identifiers, dataset licensing, and how to make connections between the metadata files and the data files. We had 7 folks from the group all contribute to those changes on GitHub and push that out, which was great. And currently we're working on some other issues. So better descriptions of dataset variables and provenance between datasets, validation of the markup so that you know that what you're pushing out is good and will work. And finally, temporal coverages. So thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Adam. Next, we will hear from the Semantic Harmonization Cluster and Gary Berg-Cross.
Thank you, Megan. Hope you can hear me okay. And hello, everybody. As you see on our first slide here, our collaboration area's main goals focus around how to make data interoperable in light of the challenging fact, that data are identified differently in different terminologies and have varying granularity and scale level. In particular, we in this cluster are, as implied in this diagram you see, the semantic hierarchy diagram here, we are working to develop, improve, and disseminate community agreed upon best practices for harmonizing semantic resources at all levels, including the lower level, leveraging that lower level of community vocabulary to improve the upper levels of the diagram. As implied in the diagram also, broadly, semantic harmonization refers to an analytical and synthetic or synthesis process of combining multiple heterogeneous terminological sources and the corresponding data representations into a more explicit, such as an ontological, processable form. Now, along with the harmonization of vocabularies, a notable part of this work is to align and harmonize the ESIP suite ontology with other commonly used and overlapping ontologies such as Envo. Slide two highlights the rationale for our work in 6 bullet points, starting with some popular contexts like FAIR, which was discussed before. So we recognize the value of standard vocabularies and ontologies to support research communication and data sharing, as well as interoperability, which is the I in FAIR, but it also supports findability and reusability. Point number 2 is for practical progress, even at the lower levels of semantic hierarchy, is complicated. It's because of competing local domain standard vocabularies and moving up too little formalization of what they mean as part of ongoing standardization of vocabulary. So, but the good news, as a third point, is that efforts like ours merge, integrate, and harmonize a range of earth and environmental science vocabularies and ontologies which have gained new visibility and support. Point number 4, and further, we now have the beginnings of improved methods and standards for such harmonization efforts, and we believe they are reaching a mature level and now include tool support. Point 5, taking them all as context for our collaborative work, we think that ESIP represents the community of interest for a range of resources to demonstrate a best practice proof of concept for this semantic harmonization. I might add that such a best practice documentation and recommendations is intended as one of our main outputs. Point 6, finally, as a medium to a long-range goal, the collaborative group also sees value in enhancing SUITE as a framework for a foundation for earth and space sciences. To conclude on slide 3, a 2-part slide if I have time, they'll say some of our more recent activities and outputs using the term ice shelf as an example. We actually worked more extensively with Envo than SUITE to begin with and added definitions from Ruth Doerr's harmonizing a global cryosphere watch or GCW work. As you see on the slide on the left, the text from the definition includes things like an ice mass attached to a coast and how it forms and flows down a coastline. And below that, you see the corresponding Envo axioms, which formalize the concepts in the definition in terms of things that are in Envo as well as relationships there. On the right side, the slide, we see some of the best practices that the team has developed and employed, such as aligning and merging in the current SUITE pull requests, as well as axioms relating to 2 ontologies and how we annotate the metadata. slide 4, which I won't necessarily go into here, shows some references that you can follow up and learn more about our effort.
Thank you, Gary. Next, we have the Sustainable Data Management Cluster and Margaret O'Brien.
Hello, I'm the chair of the Sustainable Data Management Cluster. This cluster formed in 2016 as a spin-off from members of the Data Stewardship Group. Many of us had just come from a workshop examining the ways that repositories could coordinate their data management activities, mainly in an effort to cover the gaps that we saw, but at the same time to avoid each of us trying to do it all. We focused on repositories because that's where the research data end up. At least that's what we hope. This graphic by Shelley Stahl and Aaron shows the various data stakeholders and the kinds of questions that they ask. But when we say sustainability here, we're not actually focused on sustaining the repository itself necessarily, but rather on the data that it holds, because that's the thing of value. The repository is just a conduit. So what is it that repositories should be doing to ensure that their data are sustained? So that drove our initial focus. We wanted to investigate the pathways for sustainable increased data management, collaboration and coordination that benefits both research networks and individual investigators. So we settled on 3 areas to move forward. First, at the bottom, we decided we knew that repository users need to understand the range of services offered. And so we noted that this was actually generally what the re3data.org group was pursuing. So we concentrated on giving them feedback rather than duplicating that work. And then second, in order for repositories to interact technically, they need to have practices which can be aligned. So a group of us outlined a common technical vision for repositories, and this took the form of a 10 rules paper, which was published in 2018. And then third, knowing that funders and publishers need to evaluate their investment in repositories, we examined features that might be used to construct the metrics for those groups. And this discussion is also a paper, and it's in Data Science Journal. And so you can find the links for these on our wiki. Let's see, can I have slide 2, Megan? So generally, we'd say we've completed our initial objectives, and so we're now at this crossroads and discussing where we should go next. One option is to close down and reintegrate ourselves into the data stewardship group or some other ESIP cluster. And I think it's actually kind of apropos that the sustainability group would first ask itself if this thing should be sustained rather than going straight to how. But another suggestion has come up is that we continue to focus on the activities of research repositories, particularly to produce additional guidance. One suggestion is that we work on guidelines for repositories on aspects of their operation. A first step might be a position statement such as, this is what it means to be a repository. This could be of value to those who need to make judgments on repositories and their services, or the repositories themselves as they plan future improvements. We would not want to duplicate other efforts, but integrate and refer to them. And those groups are like the Fair Data Initiative, re3data, Core Trust Zero, or the OAS. And so there's a couple questions for this group right there. And I think I heard the bell, so I'm going to be quiet.
Margaret, that's great. And I love that you put your questions on the slide. This looks like some great discussion for after you're finished with the report outs. So last but not least, we have Scotty Strachan to talk about the Enviro sensing cluster.
Okay, can you hear me there, Megan?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks everyone for slipping us in here at the end. So the ESIP Enviro Sensing Cluster has a history of attacking best practices and emerging technologies in environmental sensing applications, mostly terrestrial and freshwater aquatic. We definitely have participants and inputs that work in marine systems as well, but we're definitely more of a terrestrial aquatic interface group in terms of science applications as opposed to open ocean or anything like that. We are also interested in situ sensing, so less of remote sensing. We don't really work with satellite applications, but we have some crossovers into, let's say, cameras and drones and things of that nature. So we're an open group of really science-based people. We've developed in the past some best practices for this, and those have been posted and published. Really interested in moving the science forward as technology and practices continue to develop. So we have monthly calls. We have a listserv that is occasionally active that has several hundred people on the list. So it's a good community of people to access with your questions. And we really welcome student participation. Next slide. So the highlights of what we're working on right now, we do a mix of internal projects or discussion or support and guest presenters. And the projects that are underway right now include an ESIP lab that was funded by ESIP to work with Martha Apple at Montana Tech, and Martha is really, she's an alpine biologist. She's working on open sensor technology and telemetry for high alpine applications. and so that's the kind of project that we will support and the community will lend their aid to. We've had a lot of agency engagement in this last year from EPA, USGS, and NOAA. In fact, USGS hydrologist Joseph Bell led the winter ESIP Enviro sensing session, so that was pretty cool. And we have been reaching into the National Research Platform and cyber infrastructure communities at their conferences and workshops. And we also are very interested in, over this next year, combining this topic set of open source, very, let's say, low power, long range wireless communication like LoRa protocols, and then also ongoing work in how do we integrate real-time visualization and quality control software workflows into best practices for sensor management. So come talk to us in our summer about our summer session. We've submitted a summer session for the virtual meeting. We're looking forward to that. If any of these topics interest you, contact Renee, myself, or just get yourself on the listserv. You can find that on our wiki page. Last slide, please. So as an example of how we're starting to fuse all of these topics, this is a slide from the USGS that has shown up in several of our cluster related presentations. And so this is an example of a fusion of technologies and data acquisition side for, in this case, freshwater and terrestrial parameters, and how you can apply different softwares, edge computing principles, and telemetry principles to make all of these data integrate better and work for very specific data products that a variety of stakeholders would likely want to use. And so again, we see this is the future of Enviro sensing. This is where it's going. It's going to be a real combination of hardware, software, and communications technologies as we move forward. And we're really glad to be on the forefront of this and working with some of the groups that are pushing all of this in the right direction and taking it to the next level in terms of scale and data velocity. So that was really all I had. I really thank Megan for letting us come in here and kind of showcase what we're working on. We're looking forward to another year in ESIP.
Thank you very much, Scotty, and I'd like to thank all of you for your extremely informative, very high density report outs. I realize I gave you quite a challenge with telling you only get 3 minutes, but I appreciate the amount of care you put into giving these report outs, and I'm excited to hear some questions. So I think Erin has her eyes on the Google Doc. Erin, I'm wondering, is there a question that you think we should start off with?
So I think there weren't any that were cross-cutting. There were lots of questions and I think really nice conversation going on about the specific topics. But one of the things that I was interested in is about the connections across these collaboration areas, and it seemed like there were some connections. So I wonder maybe if we start off with that as a question, to all of the presenters. Were there things you heard from other groups that you were excited to connect on, or if you're in the audience, things that you think also could be connected together? Connections that you heard?
So I will start if nobody else is volunteering. This is Brian Wee. So there are immediately a couple of actually many connections. One is between the Ag and Climate Cluster that Bill and I are representing. I think I speak on behalf of Bill when I say that the Discovery Cluster, the stuff that Chris Linus is spearheading, has a distinctly nice parallel to what we are doing. So that's one. Dave Jones's disaster lifecycle cluster, even though Dave, I think you guys are still focused more on response. Our cluster is still more focused on mitigation and planning, so kind of far ahead. But I see the connection in reusing the workflows that we are developing for mitigation and prevention, and seeing whether any of those use cases are actually repurposable in a response situation. So imagine if in a wargaming scenario, you would actually prepare and you would come up with preparation and mitigation plans possibly. But in a response scenario, if you had captured a workflow during a wargaming exercise, the question is, can you repurpose those workflows for a response? I think and also there are connections, of course, to the clean network, where I think there are the potential collaboration areas that we should catch up on. I'd like to shut up here and let somebody else say something.
Perfect. Thanks, Bill. Those are both, and that mention of the clean network was another one that I was seeing. Anybody else just have, I guess, initial reactions to what we just heard?
Hey, Aaron, this is Dave Jones. I think it was great. I'd like to see these done more often, or maybe splintering off of this to schedule additional talks. Maybe each cluster will do that on their own, or use time on the the GoToMeeting accounts to really pick between now and the winter session, or the summer meeting. I think that'd be great.
Yeah. We also, we have a question that came in about how collaboration areas are communicating outwardly beyond this kind of webinar. Any of the collaboration area chairs want to share how you're working on outward facing communication?
I can say something, Aaron.
Sure.
So I think in data stewardship, a lot of our products look like standards or published articles or white papers. And I think that we could probably do a bit better about pushing out more information about those to the broader ESIP community and the science community at large. But we also, as Zachary mentioned, some of the clusters use the ESIP blog to put out information about things that are going on. So I know we've used the ESIP blog in the past. And then we also use the wiki to put out information, or at some level we use the wiki depending on the year, but to put out information about like current events and what's going on in our cluster at the moment and how we're collaborating with other clusters.
Those are all really good points. Thanks, Alexis. Anybody else on outward, how clusters and collaboration areas could outwardly interact?
So this is Ruth. I'm a member of several of these things: Stewardship, Schema.org, Semantic Harmonization, etc. I should note that many members of those groups actually communicate outward beyond the borders of ESIP to other communities, such as RDA, or in my case, the Polar community, and which often have very similar kinds of subgroups. So like RDA has a number of semantic related groups, and the Polar community has a vocabularies and terminologies working group. And I should note that that I and other people, some of whom are on this call, spend a fair amount of time, making sure that all of those venues are informed in a bi-directional manner. And I think that's really important, because in many cases, if that wasn't happening, you would see things tending to diverge. But because that happens, I think in many cases things are converging.
Nice. I would just add, this is Megan, that this question is the very reason why we created these highlights webinars as a fast-paced way to find out what's going on and to get involved, acknowledging that there's so much going on that it is hard to keep up. I think these events, the ESIP meetings themselves, and also I've been working hard to try to ask collaboration areas to let me know, what is it that you want to tell the broader community, and trying to elevate that. Especially in the Monday updates. So I would say that's kind of a lightweight way to try to see what is the biggest news coming out of some of these groups.
Yeah, and this is Dave Jones. I just wanted to say too that it's great to have this this opportunity to get together to talk to each other, and maybe each one of the clusters, or you can help put together, because I see in the disasters lifecycle cluster, I mean, we're working on some real-time events. We talk to NOAA, FEMA, DHS, All Hazards Consortium, and their members. And I mentioned the ESIP Federation, a lot, and the disaster lifecycle cluster, and what we're doing. A lot of the people in those organizations aren't really focused on the data and data quality and trusted sources, but they sure are interested in the results. So I was thinking here, it would be great to just have a webinar where it's almost like a free-flowing webinar to talk about current challenges that we're seeing in disaster life cycles cluster, and how that relates to operational decision making. And so, the operational decision making itself is something where you can't. You don't know what those operational problems are until you're actually in discussions with FEMA or DHS or those guys, and then they ask certain questions. And then I turn around sometimes and think, oh man, boy, this would be a great question for the disaster lifecycle cluster or the discovery cluster or something like that. So I think having the opportunity to maybe have a session, just like a powwow session on real-time issues, could really get, like, maybe Chris Linus thinking, could get Bill Tang thinking, and Brian Wee about, hey, we can really attack that and see if it's something we can put together.
Great, thank you, Dave. I'm seeing some awesome real-time question answering going on in this document. Let's see, there's a question about crossover of Enviro sensing with the drones cluster. I wonder, Renee, I see you answering that, if you or Scotty want to say anything on that topic.
Go for it, Renee.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to find the unmute button. Yeah, so we've worked with the drone cluster in the past on this topic, but I also, as an LTER information manager, I put in the comment here that there's a working group within the Information Management Committee that's developing best practices for what we are calling non-tabular data, and so we're working with members of the drone community, the drone cluster rather, on that. So in terms of, yeah, maybe Scotty can fill in the rest, some of the background on the work we've done in the past. But if you, Terry, are interested in more information about what the LTER is doing, just send me an email. Thanks.
Yeah, no, Renee covered it there, and there are some folks with the drone cluster that pop in and out of our sessions as well, but we haven't done any formal crossover projects. I think it's because some of the technology is still emerging, but the previous question on the document is related to that. Dave Jones asked about sharing data between these different platforms, and I would say that especially the USGS collaboration, the Next Gen Water Observation System project, they are looking at, they're trying to do those kinds of things, and those topics are coming into the cluster. And so I see there being a lot of opportunity along those lines. So that's something that maybe we could have a monthly topical discussion about, especially if those folks that are asking those questions have, like, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes worth of either preliminary information or presentation they would like to make to introduce the topic, and then the cluster can sort of tackle it from there. Those would be my suggestions.
This is Gary Berg for us. I put something into the document, just an idea based on what I was hearing about an opportunity for, since the summer event will be virtual. I've attended some workshops and conferences which not only have planned sessions, but have sort of an unconference session towards the end, after people have had an opportunity to be listening to some of the things that people are talking about. There's an opportunity to do a little bit of collaboration in a initially unplanned sense, but opportunistically. So I was just wondering if that's a possible idea to consider.
This is Erin. I think it's a great idea. And do we have a webcam issue? I'm just seeing a note in the chat. But that's a great idea. I think we are going to get together on Monday for anybody else that's interested in helping us shape the virtual summer meeting. And this idea for these unconference sessions is really a great one. So I'll bring that with me when I head there.
This is Nancy.
Right.
We do have a website issue. There's a video that comes on at various planes. It's not interesting to see from someone named JX.
Yes, I just dismissed that person, but I wonder if perhaps we should wrap it up. And we've had a lot of great discussion, and there's a lot going on in this document, and we can certainly continue the conversation going forward. Erin, do you agree that's a good idea?
Sounds like a great idea. I think that the Google Doc really worked well, Megan. And I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in there that we can continue to digest on. But thanks, everybody. Great call.
Yes, thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Great job.
Yeah, good job. Nice.
Good job. Thanks.
Thank you.